July 22, 1944. The Red Army T-34 tanks crashed through the perimeter fence. Soviet soldiers did not just enter a prison, they entered a slaughterhouse. The silence was deafening. The sound of distant artillery faded. The crematorium ovens were not cold. The iron doors were still hot to the touch. Inside, the ashes were glowing. The air did not smell of gunpowder. It smelled of bitter almonds. The chemical stench of Zyklon B hung over the concrete like a fog. The footage shows piles of shoes rising to the ceiling. Why were the ovens still running? The Germans usually destroyed evidence. But here, they had no time. The retreat was chaotic. Out of 100,000 prisoners, fewer than 500 remained alive. They emerged from the barracks like shadows, skins stretched tight over skulls, joints protruding. They did not cheer. They stared blankly at the liberators. Some collapsed on the dirt, too weak to lift their heads. But the history books miss a crucial detail. This system had an architect. One man turned this camp into his personal kingdom. At first glance, a simple baker from the countryside. But in reality, a sadist without equal. Erich Muhsfeldt. He did not just follow orders, he improvised. He treated the execution wall as a shooting range. Witnesses recall him smiling. He bragged about the daily death toll as if reading a sports score. Even the hardened SS officers stationed in the watchtowers looked away. The brutality was too raw, too personal. It got worse. The archives contain reports of him burning children alive to save gas. He watched the flames. He felt nothing. This is not a standard war story. This is a descent into the mind of a monster. The investigation into his crimes reveals details that prosecutors struggled to speak aloud. Thus began the hunt for the baker of Majdanek, Erich Muhsfeldt, February 18, 1913. That was the start date. Who was Erich Muhsfeldt? The documents list him as a baker, but the history books list him as a monster. He entered the world in Neubrück, Germany, an ordinary child in an ordinary house. 8 years of elementary school passed. He learned a trade. He stood by the ovens, kneading dough. He got married. He held his newborn son. There were no warning signs. Nothing in his early years hinted at the blood he would later spill. Then came January 30th, 1933. Adolf Hitler seized the chancellorship. The atmosphere in Germany shifted. Muhsfeldt shifted with it. That same year, he joined the SA. He put on the uniform of the paramilitary wing. By 1937, the SA was not enough. He graduated to the SS, the elite killing machine of the Third Reich. 2 years passed, he became a full Nazi Party member. September 1st, 1939. Tanks rolled across the border. Germany invaded Poland. The world plunged into war. January 1940. This marked the descent into true evil. He joined the SS Totenkopfverbände, the Death's Head units. At first glance, soldiers, but in reality, executioners. The archival photos show the distinction clearly. On the collar tabs, a silver skull and crossbones. They were founded by Theodor Eicke, the first commandant of Dachau. They did not fight for territory. They operated with one purpose: to administer the concentration camps, to execute the final solution, to oversee the systematic genocide of European Jewry. August 1940. Muhsfeldt arrived at Auschwitz, the name that would define hell on earth. In the frame, the endless rows of barbed wire fences. He served as the head of prisoner work details. He acted as a block leader. These positions gave him absolute power. He controlled thousands of condemned souls. A gesture from his hand could end a life. But Auschwitz was only the beginning. Events accelerated. In November 1941, the orders changed. Muhsfeldt transferred to Majdanek. He packed his gear. He left the camp, but he took his cruelty with him. He was no longer a baker. He was a weapon of the state. November 1941. That was the date the nightmare truly began. Erich Muhsfeldt transferred to the Majdanek concentration camp near Lublin, Poland. He arrived to take a specific post, chief of the Crematorium. He also took command of the Sonderkommando, the prisoner units forced to process the dead. But Muhsfeldt did not just manage the facility. He earned a reputation as one of history's most sadistic executioners. The winter of 1941 brought a shift in operations. The camp administration began experiments with Zyklon B gas. They targeted prisoners too weak to lift a shovel. The facility expanded rapidly. Soon, the camp operated at least 3 gas chambers. At first glance, they looked like communal shower rooms, but in reality, they were sealed traps designed for genocide. Thousands of Jews arrived at Majdanek. They started as forced laborers, then came starvation, typhus, and the freezing cold. If they survived the elements, the gas chambers waited. Muhsfeldt oversaw the ovens that burned the evidence. But for him, murder was not just a duty. It was entertainment. Why did he torture the dying? It wasn't just orders. He derived pleasure from the suffering. Witnesses described a twisted sadist who celebrated when the daily death count broke records. He walked the camp constantly intoxicated. In his hand, he always carried a thick truncheon. He used it to beat prisoners unconscious for no reason at all. One day, he noticed an inmate smile at a wagon driver. Muhsfeldt charged immediately. He punched the man's jaw and knocked him onto the frozen dirt. It didn't end there. He kicked the fallen prisoner repeatedly. The sound of breaking bone was audible. 3 teeth were knocked out on the spot, but it got worse. Another time, Muhsfeldt beat a prisoner with his fists until the man collapsed. The violence didn't satisfy him. He grabbed a shovel handle. He rammed it down the prisoner's throat. He left the man lying in the mud, choking and gurgling. The prisoner died in agony minutes later. Fear was his primary weapon. As crematorium chief, Muhsfeldt strolled through the camp. He selected random prisoners and whispered threats. "I'm going to get you soon," he said. "I'm going to burn you alive." He kept his promises. One incident stands out in the records. A Polish woman in her late 20s learned she had been selected for the gas chamber. Muhsfeldt came for her personally. She did not go quietly. She fought back, scratching his face and screaming a single question: "Why am I to die?" Muhsfeldt's response was chilling: "You will be burnt alive." He ordered the guards to seize her. They bound her hands and feet. They tied her to a metal trolley, the tool used to load corpses into the furnace. The woman screamed and begged for mercy. It changed nothing. The guards pushed the trolley forward. The footage of history records the horror. She went into the roaring flames alive and conscious. The killing never stopped. Long queues of prisoners formed outside the crematorium daily. They waited to be hanged on meat hooks mounted on the concrete walls. Their corpses were then fed directly into the ovens. Muhsfeldt's staff needed to meet quotas. On days when natural deaths ran low, they improvised. They selected victims from the weakest inmates to satisfy the SS command. Holocaust survivor Jerzy Lange provided testimony after the war. The scene is seared into memory. He watched Muhsfeldt walk toward the crematorium. In each hand, the killer held 2 small Jewish children, 4 children in total. Muhsfeldt carried them into the building. Moments later, gunshots echoed from inside. But the camp was not silent. A truck engine roared to life beside the crematorium. The guards revved the motor. It was a calculated tactic. The mechanical noise drowned out the children's screams. The truck usually transported bodies to the forest for burning. This time, it served as a mask for murder. The smoke continued to rise. Late October, 1943. The ovens at the camps failed. They could not process the sheer volume of death required by the regime. Erich Muhsfeldt stepped in to resolve the logistical bottleneck. He participated in what became the single largest massacre of the entire Holocaust. The operation bore a cynical code name: Operation Harvest Festival. The scope was massive. The target list included Jewish forced laborers across 3 distinct camps: Majdanek, Poniatowa, and Troniki. The preparation began with a lie. Why did the prisoners dig their own graves? The guards issued a cover story. They claimed the zigzag trenches were for air defense against Allied bombers. But the prisoners suspected the truth. Instincts screamed danger. 43,000 people were murdered. The killing spree lasted 2 days, between November 3rd and 4th, 1943. At Majdanek alone, 1,400 people died within hours. The method was industrial and brutal. Guards ordered the prisoners to strip naked. They forced them to walk into the mud of the previously dug trenches. At first glance, a construction site, but in reality, a slaughterhouse. Once the victims were inside the pits, the trap snapped shut. Machine gun crews waited on the rim. They opened fire immediately. But the camp was not silent. Loudspeakers crackled to life around the perimeter. The Germans blasted loud, upbeat music. Waltzes and marches flooded the air. The auditory chaos served a specific purpose. It masked the sound of continuous gunfire from the nearby civilian populations. The music drowned out the screams. Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS, had signed the order personally. Nazi leadership had grown paranoid. Recent Jewish uprisings in ghettos and extermination camps had shifted their calculation. To them, every remaining Jewish laborer was no longer a resource. They were a security threat. The executioners did not stop at the tree line. After the main barrage, German soldiers descended into the trenches. They walked over the layers of bodies. They scanned for movement. Any survivor received a final bullet. Then came the concealment. Trucks dumped lime over the corpses to accelerate decomposition. Fir branches covered the mass grave to hide the evidence from the air, but the grave could not hold everyone. Under the cover of darkness, 3 women pushed through the bodies. They managed to climb out of the pit. They crawled to safety. The Polish resistance found them and provided shelter. They survived the war to bear witness. Thus ended the harvest. July 24th, 1944. On this date, the Soviet tanks crushed the fences of Majdanek. The SS had attempted to flee. They burned files and loaded trucks, but the advance of the Red Army was too fast. The Germans left the camp infrastructure standing. They left the evidence. Soviet soldiers found fewer than 500 survivors among the barracks, but they found something else. The gas chambers were intact. The furnaces were cold but operational. This was physical, undeniable proof of genocide. Moscow did not hide it. Officials immediately invited Western journalists to the site. Why did they open the gates to the press so quickly? It wasn't just for news, it was to force the world to look. The footage shows piles of shoes reaching the ceiling. The camera records cans of Zyklon B stacked in storage rooms. For the first time, the Allies saw the industrial scale of the Holocaust. Between 80,000 and 130,000 people had died here. The machinery of death was visible, but the operator was gone. Erich Muhsfeldt had already transferred. By May 1944, he was back at Auschwitz-Birkenau. The assignment was critical. The Nazis were liquidating the Jews of Hungary. Muhsfeldt took command of Crematoria 2 and 3. The pace was relentless. Over 400,000 people arrived in cattle cars and turned to ash in a matter of weeks. Witnesses watched Muhsfeldt work. He did not just supervise. His Sonderkommando squads beat women to death with metal rods. Muhsfeldt walked the lines with a whip. His signature move was a lash across the bare back. At first glance, a grim executioner, but in reality, a man enjoying his work. Survivors reported a distinct detail. Muhsfeldt smiled. He watched prisoners being shoved into the furnaces. Sometimes the victims were dead. Sometimes they were still moving. Dr. Miklós Nyiszli, a Hungarian Jewish prisoner forced to work as a pathologist, recorded one specific day. Muhsfeldt executed 80 prisoners. He shot them in the back of the head, one by one. The bodies piled up. Immediately after the slaughter, Muhsfeldt walked to the medical room. He demanded a checkup. Dr. Nyiszli measured his vitals. The reading was dangerous. His blood pressure was spiking. Nyiszli asked a dangerous question. He asked if the act of killing 80 people caused the surge. Muhsfeldt exploded. He slammed his hand down. He told the doctor that killing 1 person or 80 made absolutely no difference to his pulse. The cause was simple. He drank too much alcohol. Events accelerated. There was no mercy. On another shift, a 16-year-old girl survived the gas chamber. She lay among the bodies, breathing. It was a rare malfunction. Dr. Nyiszli found her. He begged Muhsfeldt to let her live. He pleaded for a single exception. Muhsfeldt refused. He did not call for guards. He drew his pistol and shot the girl in the back of the neck. In August 1944, the war turned. Muhsfeldt was deployed to the Eastern Front. He fought in the ruins of Hungary and took a shrapnel wound. By early April 1945, he was reassigned to Flossenbürg concentration camp. The killing continued until the very end. Early April 1945. Erich Muhsfeldt arrived at Flossenbürg. The conditions here were not just harsh, they were impossible. The camp operated under a regime of absolute despair. Prisoners frequently threw themselves onto the electrified fences to escape the pain. Suicide became a daily routine. The guards did not hesitate. They conducted marathon roll calls in the biting cold, forcing inmates to stand for hours. They whipped men for a button undone or a head lowered too slowly. But the camp did not last. Allied forces broke through the perimeter defenses. The order came down: evacuate immediately. The columns moved out into the freezing countryside. This was a death march. Thousands walked until their legs failed. Muhsfeldt walked among them. He did not help the weak. He pulled his pistol. The archives describe the scene: prisoners collapsing in the snow, followed immediately by the crack of a gunshot. Muhsfeldt personally executed dozens of prisoners. He targeted the sick. He targeted the slow. For this specific diligence, the Third Reich gave him a reward: the War Merit Cross, second class, a medal for murder. May 1945. Germany surrendered. Muhsfeldt's run ended in Allied handcuffs. In January 1947, a United States military court passed judgment: life imprisonment. It seemed he would rot in a cell. But why did his fate change? The Americans were done with him, but Poland was not. They demanded his extradition. They wanted him back on the soil where he committed his atrocities. The transfer happened quickly. The Auschwitz trial began on November 24, 1947. The venue was Krakow. The duration was 1 month. At first glance, a standard tribunal, but in reality, a parade of horrors. Prosecutors presented new evidence. Witnesses spoke of his calculated cruelty. The court record captured a statement Muhsfeldt once made to a Polish political prisoner. His words were cold and direct: "If you Poles were not such fools, we would not have to burn you in crematoria." There was no defense for this. In December 1947, the Polish Supreme National Tribunal delivered the verdict: guilty of crimes against humanity. The sentence was death by hanging. Events accelerated. On January 24, 1948, guards led him into the courtyard of Montelupich prison in Krakow. The hangman waited. Muhsfeldt stood on the trapdoor. The lever was pulled. He was 34 years old. But the story did not end with the rope. His body was not buried. It was transferred to the University of Krakow. Medical students used his corpse for anatomical study. The butcher became the specimen. According to the post-war accounts of Dr. Miklós Nyiszli, Muhsfeldt's family faced their own ruin. His wife died under the falling bombs of an Allied air raid. His son was sent into the meat grinder of the Russian front. There were no tears shed for Erich Muhsfeldt. July 1944. The Red Army entered the gates, and what they found remains there today. Majdanek stands as one of the best preserved Nazi camps in existence. It is not a ruin. It is a crime scene frozen in time. The crematoria ovens sit cold and heavy. The gas chambers still stand. The footage shows scratches from fingernails remain visible on the concrete walls. Walking through this space is not tourism. It is witnessing the machinery of genocide exactly as the Soviets found it decades ago. How high was the cost? The numbers are staggering. Between 109,000 and 130,000 people perished within these specific fences. But Majdanek was just one gear in a massive engine. Across the entire Nazi camp system, millions died. 6 million Jewish lives were extinguished. But they were not alone in the mass graves. Romani people, Soviet prisoners of war who starved to death, political dissidents, disabled individuals deemed unworthy of life, LGBTQ+ people targeted for their very existence. Erich Muhsfeldt was just one executioner among thousands. At first glance, an ordinary citizen, but in reality, a prolific killer. His story exposes a terrifying truth. Monsters are not born, they are manufactured. Before the war, Muhsfeldt was a simple baker. He kneaded dough, he served customers. Yet, he became a mass murderer. Why? Because a system rewarded cruelty. It normalized killing. It celebrated genocide as a civic duty. But this was only the beginning of the lesson. Here is what you need to do right now. If this story hit you hard, That is exactly how it should feel. The Holocaust is not ancient history. It is a living memory that is fading. Survivors are still alive today. The camera records, their faces are aged, their voices weak. Their testimonies are disappearing with each passing year. That is why Army history exists. We preserve these stories before silence takes them forever. Click that subscribe button immediately. Every single subscription forces YouTube's algorithm to push this content to more people who need to see it. Hit the like button. Signal that educational Holocaust content matters. Do not just watch, act. Share this video on every platform you have. Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, Discord. These victims deserve more than silence. Leave a comment below. Tell us, which untold World War II story should we cover next? Your engagement directly determines our mission. Turn on all notifications so you never miss a briefing. We are not done. Next week, we investigate another Nazi war criminal. His crimes were so horrific that the Allies faced a dilemma. They debated whether to give him a trial or simply execute him on sight. You won't want to miss it. These victims spoke their truth. Now it is your turn to make sure the world hears it. Subscribe, like, share, comment now.